Unfortunately, this was another quarter for Twitter that was very much like the last one. And what I mean by that is they added a few new users, which is great, but they revealed some very troubling business issues. Most notably, they did not hit the revenue goals for this quarter, or when I say goals, I should say expectations from Wall Street. And more importantly, they lowered their guidance for Q3, which means they're expected to make a lot less revenue next quarter than we initially thought. So the combination of those two things sent Twitter stock down, I believe, more than 11% in after-hours trading, and it's just kind of it's tough, man. I mean, Twitter has just been kind of doing the same thing quarter after quarter after quarter, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better for them. And this was just another one.
User growth also totally stagnated. What was it, like 3 million users in the last three months, basically?
Yeah, they added 3 million, which I didn't even point out as being bad because I was like, oh, they added 3 million. That's okay.
Actually added
to put that
something
in perspective, for those people who, and I know that we probably shouldn't get in the business of comparing Twitter and Facebook, although everyone does, but Facebook shares earnings tomorrow, and I would imagine they'll be somewhere in the ballpark of 40 to 50 million new users for the same quarter. And they're already 5 times Twitter's size, right? So that just goes to show kind of how minute that 3 million is compared to someone like Facebook.
Right. How is Wall Street responded after the fact, after this?
Yeah, they weren't super happy. The stock was down 11%. I was on the earnings call. There were a lot of questions around the revenue miss, and more importantly, the future revenue issues that they're kind of forecasting here. And Twitter basically boiled it down to 2 things. They said, there's a lot more competition for the brand advertisers that we've always been able to acquire. And the ads that we're selling are more expensive than some advertisers are willing to pay. And the issue is, if you want people to, fork over more than market value for your ads, or on the higher end of market value for your ads, you need to be able to demonstrate that these ads are worth it. And so that's the challenge that Twitter now has, is to be able to say, if we're going to charge you an arm and a leg for these ads, we need to show that you're actually going to be making sales and revenue on the back end, ROI as they call it, return on investment. And I don't know if they've done a good job of doing that. It certainly doesn't seem like they have, since there were a lot of questions about it. And I think that's a massive challenge. Like, measurement is something Google and Facebook have been able to kind of figure out, but I mean, it is a really tough thing to do, and I think that's Twitter's big obstacle now.
So much to investors' chagrin, we can't talk about Twitter without talking about harassment. Jack Dorsey made a statement about harassment. It sounded like he was answering someone's question sort of off the fly, but his answer was so it sounded like talking points. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. I don't know for sure. I'm pretty sure it was a prepared, canned answer, if you will. I don't have a problem with that. Only when you're talking about something as serious as harassment and abuse, I would expect him to have something prepared to say. I think the only issue people took with it was that it was kind of folded into the middle of this Q&A. So they were taking questions from analysts, and they were taking questions from Twitter, and then all of a sudden they were like, and people on Twitter are asking, and then, kind of framed it in, of course, just the way, and then Jack had his answer totally prepared. It just didn't feel natural at all. Which, again, whatever, that's fine. They should have addressed it. I think the issue for me is more, if you're going to prepare a statement about it, and if you're going to literally tee up a question to yourself about it, why don't you just do it at the very beginning of this call, right? Like, don't fold it in with all the other Q&A as though it's just like another random question. Go ahead and separate it out, address it. If it's really important, which is what they said it is, then make it important by moving it to the very top of the call. And so that was my issue. I think people were just, at this point, probably nitpicking a little bit, myself included, like trying to find things to kind of pile on. But at the same time, you can't say that this is an important thing, and then the delivery of the message and everything kind of go the way that it did. I know it bothered some people, I could tell from Twitter. So I wish they could have figured that out a little better.
Well, it sounded like, I'll read the statement because it didn't really answer the question about, that we all ask, like, how do they keep the free speech aspect of it, keep the anonymity, the good part of anonymity, and also curb the harassment. He said, Twitter not now or never will be a place to show people part of what's happening or being said. So part of what's happening. They don't want to censor anyone. He said, at its best, the platform allows people to reach across the divide. We recognize it's a high hope to elevate civil discourse. I emphasize civil discourse. Abuse is not part of the civil discourse. But that was it.
Yeah, I mean, so the issue that I kept facing, I wrote about, and we don't need to get into all of the details, but they basically, to catch people up, they banned a very prominent Twitter troll, if you will, last week. This person had a lot of support and followers who then came and said, hey, this is a free speech issue. Like, you can't ban someone. We're allowed to say whatever we want. And my response, and I think the response of other folks who cover this company, is you can't say whatever you want. I mean, there are terms and guidelines for using Twitter, just like there are guidelines for using Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat. And when you routinely break those guidelines, the company is free to, ask you to leave, which is what happened here. And B, I think most people would agree that free speech ends when you start abusing others, right? You can kind of say whatever you want in the confines of your own home and on your own property or whatever, but when you go out of your way to be racist or sexist or threatening to another person, I think you kind of hand over your right to free speech. And that is what Twitter essentially did. And it created a bit of a stir, and that's what Jack was addressing today. I don't know how they fix that problem, though. And he didn't really say how they fix that problem. And I think it is a massive problem, and we'll see, how long it takes for them to figure this out if they ever do.
Yeah, because really big challenge is, where do you draw that line? Now you have a certain example of where that line has been drawn in a public sense. Does it go one way or the other way the next time someone complains about someone and says, oh, well, this is a troll because they said this or that? That's a hard assessment for a company like Twitter to make, especially when they've talked so much about free speech and all that kind of stuff. Now, speaking of CEO Jack Dorsey, he's been on for a year now. Again, this is kind of like his latest time in the rodeo. He's been on for the past year. Twitter hasn't seen a whole lot of improvement, if at all, in that time. What does this say about his leadership at this point?
Oh man, I mean, what's really tough is that I don't think that, like, the issue that Twitter is dealing with right now. So Jack comes in, it was about a year ago. Since then, they've lost a significant number of their top executives. Folks at the VP level who have left. It felt like for a while it was literally every week, or they'd even go in clumps. It is really hard to do a turnaround when you're constantly trying to fill roles, because obviously what that does is, if the head of media leaves, everyone on the media team says, well, hell, I don't want to be here. Like, the boss who we have liked for the last 4 years just left. We're going to bounce too. And so there's been this terrible churn at Twitter for the last year, where it doesn't seem like they're able to stabilize any type of corporate structure. And so that has to fall on Jack's shoulders, right? I mean, it's tough for anyone to come in and not have some amount of churn. I think that's just natural. But Twitter has kind of always been a little bit worse and a little bit more public than it seems like everyone else is when it comes to this stuff. And so the fact that it has been a year, growth is still bad. The revenue stuff has gotten worse. It certainly doesn't speak super highly to whatever plan that they've implemented so far. And I would imagine, if you work at Square, you got to be pretty frustrated, right? Because here your CEO is getting kind of roasted in the press and kind of leading a struggling Twitter company, when meanwhile, we're over here, we're your other company. Really, that's the perception, at least from the outside, is that Square is the other company. And they don't want to be lumped in with what is happening with Twitter. And I feel like a lot of times they do because of Jack. And so I don't know how long you can manage two companies, but it's got to be getting near the end of that rope.